Friends, patriots, and truth seekers, prepare yourselves. What you are about to read is not merely a recounting of historical events, but a deep dive into the strategic undercurrents that reshaped the geopolitical landscape in ways few could have predicted. While the world's attention was fixated on the bluster and bombast emanating from Washington, D.C., a quiet revolution was brewing just north of the border. A revolution orchestrated with such precision and foresight that it has left the architects of chaos reeling, their grand designs crumbling before their very eyes. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation. Before we plunge headfirst into this astonishing narrative, a brief moment. If you find yourself captivated by the unraveling of these intricate power plays, if the truth behind the headlines ignites a spark within you, then do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Join our growing community of informed citizens and ensure you never miss another crucial insight. Give this story a like if you believe in the power of strategic brilliance over brute force. And most importantly, comment below with your thoughts, your theories, and your own observations as we dissect this monumental shift. Your engagement fuels the pursuit of truth. Now, let us begin. In an era defined by a singular, unyielding mantra, America first, the global stage became a volatile arena. President Trump, with a finger poised over his Twitter feed and a penchant for unilateral action, embarked on a campaign of economic disruption. His targets were not just distant adversaries, but shockingly, America's closest, most steadfast allies. Threats were tweeted like dictates, and tariffs were slapped down with the blunt force of a sledgehammer, all in the name of a perceived national advantage. The world watched, aghast, as decades of carefully cultivated alliances seemed to unravel with each pronouncement. It was a chaotic, unpredictable ballet of economic coercion, designed, it seemed, to bring every nation to heel under the weight of American might. Yet amidst this storm of trade wars and diplomatic discord, something truly extraordinary was happening just north of the border. Canada, often perceived as America's polite, unassuming neighbor, was quietly orchestrating what can only be described as the most brilliant diplomatic chess move of the decade. This wasn't a reactive skirmish, it was a meticulously planned, long-game strategy. And the most astonishing part? Most Americans, caught in the whirlwind of daily headlines and presidential pronouncements, never even saw it coming. They were told of victories, of industries being secured, of deficits being corrected, while the true game was being played on a different board entirely. What we are about to reveal transcends the typical trade dispute. This is a calculated economic masterstroke, a strategic pivot that has not only left the Trump administration scrambling for answers, but has also sent shockwaves through global markets, leaving allies questioning the very foundation of American leadership. It has forced the world to confront a profound question. Is the era of American dominance, as we have known it for generations, finally coming to an end? The old relationship, built on the deepening integration of economies and tight security cooperation, was not merely strained. It was, as we will see, fundamentally over. This was Trump's tariff war, but Canada was about to show the world that even in an age of bluster, true power lies in strategic foresight and quiet, unwavering resolve.
As the first tremors of Trump's America First earthquake rattled global markets, the world braced for the inevitable. But few could have predicted the sheer audacity, the brazen disregard for historical ties that would characterize his next move. Trump, in his typical unyielding fashion, decided to double down on his tariff war, not against some distant, perceived adversary, but against the very heart of North American partnership. "We are going to be imposing a 25% increase," he declared, his words echoing with an almost gleeful conviction. "We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry in the United States. Nobody's going to get around that." This wasn't just an economic policy, it was a declaration of economic warfare, thinly disguised as a measure of national security. And this time, he didn't just target distant nations, he went straight for the jugular of America's most reliable, most integrated partner, Canada. A brutal, unprecedented 50% tariff on Canadian steel. The irony was palpable, almost comedic, as he attempted to soften the blow with platitudes. "This is very friendly. This is not going to be like we had another little blow-up with somebody else. That was a much different. This is a very friendly conversation." Yet the words that followed were anything but friendly. "We want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada. And we put tariffs on cars from Canada, and at a certain point, it won't make economic sense for Canada to build those cars." The message was clear. Canada was to be subjugated, its industries kneecapped, its economic sovereignty undermined. "We really don't want Canadian steel, and we don't want Canadian aluminum, and various other things, because we want to be able to do it ourselves." This wasn't merely protectionism. It was a demand for absolute economic subservience, predicated on a warped perception of trade deficits. "There's no reason for us to be subsidizing Canada," he asserted, framing a mutually beneficial relationship as a one-sided burden. The response from Ottawa was swift, unequivocal, and delivered with a steely resolve that belied the usual diplomatic niceties. President Trump again imposed unjustified tariffs on our nation in violation of our existing trade agreements, came the firm declaration. "We will respond forcefully. Nothing is off the table to defend our workers and our country." This wasn't a plea. It was a promise to fight the U.S. tariffs with retaliatory trade actions of our own that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impacts here in Canada. The gauntlet had been thrown, and Canada was not backing down. "It's my solemn promise that when President Trump threatens us again, we will fight back. We will fight back with everything we have to get the best deal for Canada. We will build an independent future for our country stronger than ever." The road ahead, they acknowledge, would be long, without silver bullet or quick fix, but their confidence in their nation and their understanding of Canada's intrinsic love for its own sovereignty would guide them. Trump's team, meanwhile, seemed to inhabit an alternate reality, convinced that these aggressive maneuvers were part of some grand winning strategy. They pointed to corporate announcements: Ford's $500 million, General Motors' $4 billion, Hyundai's $21 billion in American investments, as irrefutable proof that the tariffs were working. But here's where the fundamental miscalculation lay, a blind spot that would prove catastrophic. These weren't investments driven by confidence in American leadership or a desire for long-term partnership. No, these were investments driven by fear, the raw, visceral fear of American retaliation, of being shut out, of facing punitive tariffs themselves. Companies were building defensive positions, not collaborative futures. And the moment that fear became too expensive to manage, they would inevitably start looking for alternatives. This profound misunderstanding of motivation, this inability to distinguish genuine partnership from coerced compliance, sealed the fate of a relationship that had endured for over 80 years. The roots of this crisis, ignited by Trump's America First tariff blitz on April 2nd, pushed Canada towards a decision that would reshape the entire North American economy. The relationship between these two nations, once joined at the hip, was, ladies and gentlemen, now officially over. The jugular strike had landed, but it was not Canada that would bleed out. While Trump was busy celebrating what he mistakenly believed was a victory, basking in the perceived submission of corporate giants and the supposed success of his tariff regime, a different kind of leader was already 3 moves ahead. Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister, a figure of strategic genius in this narrative, was not in Washington begging for mercy. He was on a plane, heading east, not west. His destinations? London, Paris, and the heart of a Europe growing increasingly wary of American unpredictability. What he was building there would not just counter Trump's aggression, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Western world, quietly, surgically, and devastatingly. Here's what makes Carney's response so utterly incredible, so profoundly revolutionary. Instead of engaging in the public shouting match Trump so clearly craved, instead of retaliating with their own tariffs in a tit-for-tat exchange that would only escalate the chaos, Canada did something completely unexpected. They pivoted. And they pivoted hard, in a direction that threatened to unravel decades of North American economic integration, a bond once thought unbreakable. This wasn't about a mere trade spat. This was about a fundamental reorientation of national strategy, born from the stark realization that the United States under Trump was no longer a stable, reliable partner. Carney's message, delivered with measured tones and an unwavering gaze, was simple yet profound. Canada could no longer afford to rely on the United States. The era of American economic predominance, at least as an unquestioned anchor for Canadian policy, was over. And Canada was ready to build something better, something more resilient, with allies who understood the value of long-term trust and shared values. He didn't just say it, he backed it up with the most aggressive pivot in Canadian foreign policy since World War II, a move that would send shockwaves through the very foundations of the Western alliance. First, the defense pivot. For decades, Canada had comfortably nestled under the American military umbrella, content to spend less than 1% of its GDP on defense. It was a comfortable arrangement, a reliance that seemed immutable. But Carney shattered that assumption with a single audacious announcement. Canada would hit NATO's 2% target immediately. Not gradually, not eventually, but this year. This commitment represented tens of billions of dollars in new defense spending, a staggering sum. And here's the kicker, the strategic twist that would truly sting Washington. Instead of sending that money to American defense contractors as they always had, Canada was redirecting it to European partners. The implications were staggering. Canada joining Europe's Rearm Europe initiative meant $900 billion in defense spending that would not be flowing into American coffers. It meant Canadian steel and aluminum, once destined for American projects, now going to European defense. It meant supply chains built over generations being rerouted away from the United States. But the defense pivot was just the beginning, a prelude to the masterstroke that would hit Trump where it truly hurt. The F-35 fighter jet program. This was one of America's most expensive and most important military exports, a lifeline for American aerospace workers. Canada was slated to buy $73 billion worth of these jets over the next 40 decades. It was a guaranteed sale, a symbol of unwavering alliance. But guess what? Canada was now actively exploring alternatives. Swedish Gripen fighters, European consortium options, anything but American. The logic was bulletproof, irrefutable. How can you entrust your national defense to a country that is actively attacking your economy? The message was clear, chillingly so. America, under Trump, was no longer viewed as a reliable partner. It was viewed as a threat. This was the quiet rebellion, a strategic masterpiece unfolding, one deliberate step at a time.
Herein lies the true genius and the most terrifying consequence for Washington of Canada's strategic masterstroke. Trump, in his transactional myopia, believed he could pressure Canada into submission with economic threats, twisting their arm until they bent to his will. Instead, he unwittingly pushed them into building the exact kind of independence that America had spent decades trying to prevent. And the scariest part for Washington? This could be contagious. Other countries were watching. From the anxious capitals of Europe to the burgeoning economic powerhouses of Asia,
leaders observed Canada's quiet, professional defiance. If Canada, America's most integrated and historically loyal ally, could successfully pivot away from American dependence, why couldn't they? If Canada could forge robust defense partnerships with Europe, strengthen trade relationships with Asia, and systematically reduce its economic vulnerability to American mood swings and capricious policies, what indeed was stopping other allies from following the same playbook? The answer, chillingly, was nothing. And that precisely is what made this moment so profoundly dangerous for American interests. Trump didn't just attack Canadian steel, he attacked the very foundation of American influence. He took America's greatest strength, its vast, interconnected network of alliances built on decades of trust and shared values, and, through his own actions, systematically transformed it into a liability. Mark Carney, with his quiet diplomacy and strategic thinking, was not merely reacting, he was showing the world exactly how to exploit that weakness, how to navigate a path to sovereignty in an increasingly unpredictable global landscape. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, more complex. While Trump was busy making enemies out of allies, while he was unilaterally dismantling the post-war order, the global economy itself was already shifting in profound ways that made American dominance less essential, less absolute. China and Europe were quietly yet determinedly building trade relationships that bypassed American markets entirely. Asian countries were creating their own financial institutions, robust and independent, that directly competed with the American-dominated ones. And Canada, America's most reliable partner, the nation once considered an extension of the American economic sphere, was suddenly looking like the smartest player in the room, presciently adapting to a multipolar world that was already emerging. The numbers, when they began to tell their story, were stark. Canada's pivot to Europe wasn't just symbolic, it was structural. Joint defense projects worth hundreds of billions of dollars, trade agreements that explicitly prioritized European partners over American ones, investment flows that were designed to build Canadian independence rather than reinforce American dependence. This wasn't merely diplomacy, it was economic warfare, and Canada, with its quiet, methodical approach, was winning. What made this even more remarkable was Carney's masterful execution, his ability to orchestrate this pivot without triggering a complete breakdown in relations. He didn't insult Trump publicly, there were no Twitter wars, no theatrical walkouts from summits. Instead, he spoke in measured tones about Canada's inherent need for stable, reliable partners. Every carefully chosen word, every professional gesture, was a subtle yet potent knife in the back of American assumptions about Canadian loyalty, about Canadian inevitability. The genius of this approach was its unassailability. How do you argue with a country that simply states its desire for stable partnerships? How do you criticize an ally for seeking reliable trading relationships? How do you attack a neighbor for building their own defense capabilities? You can't, not without looking like precisely the kind of unstable, unreliable partner they are trying to avoid. And that, tragically for Trump, was the trap he walked into. Every aggressive move he made, every tariff threat, every diplomatic tantrum only served to prove Canada's point, to reinforce their argument for independence, to validate their decision to look elsewhere for partnership. Trump had turned American strength into American weakness, and there was no easy way back.
Here, then, is the ultimate devastation for Trump's America First doctrine and the enduring legacy of Canada's masterstroke. Trump, in his myopic view of international relations, saw every interaction as a zero-sum game. Someone wins, someone loses. But real international partnerships, the kind that build enduring prosperity and security, are not built on dominance. They are forged in the crucible of mutual benefit, shared values, and most critically, long-term trust. And those, precisely, are the very foundations Trump had been systematically destroying with every tweet, every tariff, every diplomatic tantrum. Canada's pivot wasn't just about economics or defense. It was, at its very core, about values. They were choosing to align themselves with countries that truly shared their commitment to democracy, to human rights, to the rule of international law. They were choosing stability over chaos, cooperation over domination, genuine partnership over bullying. And in doing so, they were offering a compelling model, a tangible blueprint for how other countries, weary of American aggression and unpredictability, could respond. The timing of this revelation could not have been more devastating for American interests. Just as China was increasingly challenging American dominance in Asia, just as Europe was diligently building its own strategic autonomy, just as global institutions were adapting, however slowly, to the undeniable reality of a multipolar world, America's closest, most loyal ally was publicly, unequivocally declaring that the era of American predominance was over. This was not merely a diplomatic setback, it was a historical inflection point, a seismic shift that would reverberate for decades to come. And the most infuriating part for Trump? There was, quite simply, nothing he could do about it. He couldn't invade Canada. He couldn't sanction them into submission. He couldn't tweet them back into compliance. All he could do was watch, impotent, as his own self-defeating policies pushed America's most valuable partner, its most reliable friend, into the arms of competitors who actually knew how to treat allies with respect. This is the inevitable consequence when you confuse strength with bullying, when you mistake fear for loyalty, when you reduce profound partnerships to mere transactions. Eventually, your partners find better options, and once they do, there's no going back. Canada's masterstroke isn't just brilliant because it weakens American influence. It's brilliant because, simultaneously and profoundly, strengthens Canadian independence. They weren't just walking away from an abusive relationship, they were building something better, something robust, something that didn't depend on the whims of an unstable neighbor, something that could survive and thrive regardless of who occupied the White House. The message to the world was clear, undeniable. America under Trump was no longer the indispensable nation. It was just another country, one that happened to possess immense military and economic power, but one that could no longer be trusted to wield either responsibly. And if Canada, America's most loyal ally, could reach that conclusion, how long before everyone else did too? This, then, is the real long-term cost of Trump's America First agenda. Not just higher prices for American consumers, not just disrupted supply chains, not just damaged relationships. It is the systematic destruction of American soft power, the irreversible erosion of American influence, and the undeniable acceleration of a multipolar world where America is just one player among many. Mark Carney understood this. He saw the writing on the wall not as a threat, but as an opportunity, and acted accordingly. While Trump was playing checkers, Carney was playing chess, and the game, ladies and gentlemen, is far from over. We hope this deep dive into Canada's strategic brilliance has opened your eyes to the complex dynamics shaping our world. If you found this analysis insightful, if it sparked a new understanding, please take a moment to like this story, share it with those who seek truth, and comment below with your thoughts and predictions for the future of global power. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. Join us as we continue to uncover the hidden narratives, the unseen master strokes that define our turbulent times. Your engagement is our greatest strength.